Welcome to On Point. I'm joined by Union Cabinet Minister Hardeep Puri, who is in charge of housing, urban affairs, petroleum and natural gas. Thank you so much, sir, for making time. Bharatiya Janata Party's manifesto and its Sankalp Patra, it comes in the realm of think big. What are its most unique features? If I may ask you the three most unique features.
Well, first of all, it's not just a Sankalp Patra. It's a vision document. And it is unique in as much as, number one, since you asked for three, number one, it outlines in very clear terms what the Bharatiya Janata Party under the Honorable Prime Minister has done in the last 10 years. That's the first part. It's a 48-page document. Then it lists 24 guarantees. What is the Bharatiya Janata Party proposing to do in continuation of that development work of the last 10 years, going forward in the next 5 years? The second, and I think most important part, is that it provides a blueprint in terms of specific development coordinates of how these 5 years will be spent in order to be able to transition to a Viksit Bharat or a developed nation by 2047. When the Prime Minister uses words like 24/7 and 2047, when he talks about social infrastructure, physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure. The third one is that the BJP, unlike any other political party in the world that I know of, when it produces a Sankalp Patra, it invariably has a lot of solid introspection. Will we be able to deliver on that? As a result of which, now you can say that the 2024 Sankalp Patra has been produced by a government which has been in office for 10 years. But there was a time when we were not in office. I'm talking about 2014. We were outside. And yet, what we said in the 2014 manifesto or Sankalp Patra, we delivered. In the 2019 Sankalp Patra, we said we will deliver on women's reservation. We have delivered on that. So if you compile all the commitments, all the statements of intent made, there are very few things left out. You could come possibly to say UCC. That's one thing which finds a reference somewhere but has not been delivered. But again, I admire the language which has been used both for the UCC and the One Nation, One Poll. One Nation, One Poll, they say, we appointed a high-powered committee under the previous president. We will look at its recommendations with a view to implementation. Let me tell you a story which is very interesting. I was a joint secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, and we were having foreign office level talks with the UK. As a joint secretary, I had to go and talk to my counterpart in London. The elections had just taken place. Mr. Vajpayee was Prime Minister. I was asked before I went to London to go and see the Principal Secretary, Mr. Brijesh Mishra. And he asked me, he didn't ask me, he told me, "Ja rahe ho? Confidence se baat karna." So I was thinking, I said, since when has Mr. Mishra thinking that I don't have confidence? I was always known as a guy with enough confidence. I realized once we reached there, there was a formulation in the manifesto at that point of time in Mr. Vajpayee's government, in the BJP manifesto. We will review our nuclear option. Okay? They asked me, I took out the BJP manifesto and I said, yes, we will review our nuclear option. And he said, what does it mean? You will conduct nuclear tests? I said, it means exactly what it says there. That we will look at the pros and cons, we will review the nuclear option, we will look at it in the context of what's happening in the world. That's all the manifesto said. This thing was forgotten. Luckily, very detailed record of discussion was made. After May 98, when we decided to exercise the nuclear option, everybody was very upset with us, including the UK. One of the talking points made was that your delegation, your senior official, Joint Secretary, I don't know how senior, came here and he misled us. We showed them the record of discussion. What was your question and what did we say? There was no element of misleading anyone. We said we will review it and the outcome is known. Here it's not a question of reviewing. Here the language in both UCC and One Country, One Poll is very clear. It acknowledges that there will be difficulties. But I can ask you a counter question. If in 2014, 19 and 24, if you're asked 10 years ago, if you had been asked, Would you have believed that 370 will go? I think your answer would have been no. Would you have believed this would have happened? Your answer is no. So this is a government and a prime minister whose DNA shows total commitment to nation first, to social and economic transformation. And I think what is in the manifesto is very serious. I think we will get there. We have not committed ourselves beyond a point to making efforts to achieve it.
I'll come back to the nitty-gritties of the Sankalp Patra and the manifesto and the manufacturing issues, the manufacturing hub which it talks about. Can you take us through how Prime Minister has reshaped India's foreign policy, Bharat's foreign policy?
You want actually a really honest answer? He's the first Prime Minister, or maybe not the first, one of the very few Prime Ministers I know who embodies the thinking, the conceptualization and the implementation of foreign policy in his own persona. I mean, he took on the G20 at a time when the world was very divided. He took on the G20 in a deeply divided world. He could play unifier. We had prime ministers in the past, maybe because of their age, they were sleepy. If they took long journeys, they had to rest in between. Here is a man who comes after a 15 hours non-stop flight in the United States, from the United States, and he ends up here, and within 45 minutes he's at the parliament under construction. My next morning when I was getting a call, my wife told me कि सुबह call आ रही है, वो डांट पड़ने वाली है कि वो पार्लियामेंट गए थे रात को लैंड करने के बाद. मैंने कहा नहीं, अगर पार्लियामेंट के डांट पड़नी थी तो कल रात को ही पड़ जाती. He will not wait till the morning. He's a hands-on person. So when he talks, and I'll tell you the sections of the foreign policy in the manifesto, in the Sankalp Patra, leading the global south, absolutely clear, G20, and taking it further. First responder Bharat, trusted global partner and a first responder, continuing humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. Whenever there's a crisis anywhere in the world, why are people turning to Modi's India? There were Russia-Ukraine conflict, there are 24,000 students stuck there. He spoke to both the heads of state, got a respite, and we were able to pull those people out. Becoming a permanent member of the Security Council. We are committed to seeking permanent membership to elevate Bharat's position in global decision making. Global consensus on fight against terrorism, following the neighborhood first policy, strengthening maritime vision. I mean, which party manifesto? Any party manifesto has this much on foreign policy at any given point of time.
And the added question is, can you please take us through when Prime Minister's vision document says zero tolerance to terrorism? It's part of our internal security.
I think it is a very, very welcome formulation. We have always said we have zero tolerance on terrorism, and yet in terms of thought and action, we have been lethargic on it. Look, I was around when 26/11 took place.
You use the word lethargic.
Lethargic. What was the reaction? A former colleague of mine, a great friend of mine, has written a book on choices. He said sometimes when something goes against India and somebody does something bad, we exercise a choice not to react. My idea of leading life is that if somebody causes me harm, I will give him such a big thappad, no matter what the consequences is. So next time he wants to cause me harm, look, we are dealing with a classic case of cross-border terrorism. The terrorists were incubated, financed, and sent across the border to cause mayhem. And they succeeded not only in causing mayhem in a state in India, but in one particular state, J&K, they caused total chaos. Foreign funding, people coming from across the border. Look at the difference between the earlier period and now. Today, every one of our leaders, and I'm being careful, Prime Minister also, but it's Rajnath ji. He said, if somebody sends a terrorist across the border from the western neighbor to us, हम उनकी territory में जाके घुस के उनकी वहीं पिटाई करके आएंगे. The norm now is, and the world expects it, you play the fool with India, you will get a response. And that is when zero, you say there's no point my saying that I have zero tolerance for terrorism. I must be able to demonstrate it in my action. That is what this Prime Minister is able to do. That is why he carries conviction. That is why people take him seriously.
Fair enough. So, in 1980s and 1990s, it was impossible to dream of a women as a constituency. India being a multi-religious, divided on multiple castes. There were heated debates in parliament when I don't want to name the politician, the word parkati was used. But how has, under Prime Minister Modi, women as a category, political category has emerged? Lakhpati Didi is mentioned in the manifesto. How has that become possible that women as a category has come out?
I'm going to reveal something on your channel which I've never spoken about to date. In April 2013, I went to call on the then Chief Minister of Gujarat. I've had the privilege of knowing him for many years. I hosted him in Geneva when I was the ambassador and permanent representative. He had come to get the ashes of the former freedom fighter, Shyamji Krishanji Verma. So, in 2013 March, I retired from the Foreign Service. I had the privilege of knowing him. I went to him seeking a courtesy call. And that is the day, by the way, the day I called when that Sarabjit Singh was a prisoner in a Pakistani jail, which I think he had been killed or something. I remember the date very clearly. I was told, ki aap samay nagar ke aana. I had a long meeting with him. 50% of that focus of that meeting was on precisely the question you are saying. I think I'm talking about 2013. He acutely understood the importance not just of the women vote, but of the strength of women in national transformation. He really understood what Nari Shakti is. He really understood what Mahila Shashактikaran is. And therefore, this transformation, this movement from women-centered development, building a toilet for the dignity of the girl child, that is one thing. But going to women-led development, that is when you get the next census, delayed because of the COVID, you will get delimitation and then you will have 33.3% of women in the national parliament and in the state legislature. Mr. Modi has been acutely conscious of that. I mean, when we did talk about triple talaq, it comes from the same understanding. And today, when we are talking about, you just mentioned, the 2 crore Lakhpati Didis will become 3 crore Lakhpati Didis. But more than that, he has understood the value of this. Today, look at the Labharthis, on the stage. One of these young Labharthis was a lady who came. He has understood that these schemes of empowerment, whether it's a toilet or it's skills or it's training, one of them, he also said today, हमने तो कभी साइकिल नहीं चलाई, हमें साइकिल नहीं दी, अब हम पायलट बन गए.
Your manifesto also talks about manufacturing hub. And the reason why I asked you the question on women was, if you look at the growth trajectories of the tiger economies of Korea or Japan, or even of the trajectory which the China took, they are women-led, and equal participation of women is very crucial in manufacturing sector. Prime Minister has created a lot of areas of reform. I think he's the only Prime Minister to have said, Shauchalay pehle aur baad mein devalay. Someone who had the guts to say that. But that's in the realm of dignity and creating that social sphere of movement. How hopeful are you that it will transform into movement for women when it comes to economic activity, which is traveling out and working?
It's already taking place. Let me put it to you the other way around. Let me put it. First of all tiger economies, wherever there's been women-led development, your GDP goes up by 30%. I mean, this is a proven fact. I've served in several countries. Tomorrow, when you turn around, you will have a situation. Look, India had already, let me give some credit to the past also. We've had women in politics. You've had an Indira Gandhi, you've had a lady president. I mean, we are not questioning that. Something else is happening today. That equality of gender and opportunity. Today you are going to find that, look at the number of steps he has taken. Women in combat roles in the armed forces. That never happened earlier. It's because of his inherent and strong respect for women that these things are possible and they take place seamlessly. I've got women heading oil marketing companies. We have women as secretaries to government all over the place. One was a process which was in the making by itself over the last 20 years. We are not talking about that. We are talking about the specific steps this Prime Minister has taken in order to break the glass ceiling and in order to give our daughters, our sisters opportunity. You know, you're talking about boardrooms, you're talking about all that. You will see that much earlier than you and I expect. It's work in progress.
It's work in progress. So a lot of people would say that there's also commonality in the manifesto. It's expenditure heavy. For example, ration to the poor and other aspects which is known as the Labharti program. That part of the expenditure is there. It's similar to a lot of other manifestos which have come out.
I take a slightly different view. Okay. And I'll tell you why I take a slightly different view. Feeding 80 crore people 3 meals of dry ration in a day, I don't take that as an expenditure burden. I take that as an investment. Because along with that, you're giving them technology, along with that, you're giving them skill training, along with that, you're providing, getting them into this thing economy. It's very different from what happened earlier. Earlier, a lot of people had gas connections, and the Prime Minister said, those of you who don't need them, they gave them up. But today, you are taking people, you know, because India is a sui generis case. Why do I say that? Because you've got a large economy, but you've got a large population base, so the per capita incomes are low. Very soon you will find you will not need to do it. We needed to produce 220 crore vaccines and distribute them free, because if you had not done that, many people would not have got vaccinated. Today you had to do it, and look, you're smiling. You're smiling because even a large country, $19 trillion economy, you know, they are not out of it yet. So I take that as an investment, the free vaccine and free food. हाँ, अभी क्या ज़रूरत है? अभी ज़रूरत इसलिए है because they are now beautifully coming out of the trough. And today, it is better to use that as an investment, and you'll find that economic growth, last quarter you grew at 8.6%. And look, you can afford it now. I can tell you about why we can afford it. I'll tell you what my oil companies are doing. Somebody told me tongue in cheek, नहीं वो तो market बढ़ रही है इसलिए आपके PSUs बढ़ रहे हैं. अरे मेरी market valuation, market तो 39% बढ़ी है. All the OMCs have gone up in profitability in multiples thereof. कोई 150%, कोई 200%. So economy is doing well. And when the economy is doing well, you can afford these. And I look at that as investment.
Mr. Puri, in one of my previous questions, you mentioned permanent seat in United Nations. I remember a conversation in 2015 at late Arun Jaitley's residence. There were 5 batches of journalists who were called for dinner. I was part of the 5th. And we were allowed to ask questions to the Prime Minister. So suddenly the Prime Minister said, ask correct questions. So we asked questions which were closer to us. So he said, ask questions, why aren't we there in United Nations as a permanent member? That was 2015. Today I'm sitting in front of you. It's 2024. Bretton Woods institutions are dead. Isn't it near impossible for any country outside those P5 to make space where they have guardrailed everything?
I have a lot of difficulty. I think before 2013, when I was PR, I used to find that somehow Delhi did not show the degree of enthusiasm to pursue a permanent seat that I wanted.
Sense of global leadership?
Yes, global leadership, whatever. I think the global leadership has come from our side. I think the Prime Minister can be given full marks for that. But there's something else has happened. The global situation has gone into a tailspin. Let me explain why I am saying that. You are talking about 2015. 3-4 years, then comes the pandemic. Pandemic, we lost 2 years. When the pandemic came, then the Russia-Ukraine thing started. When that started, what has happened? The United Nations is not even a shadow of its former self. The permanent, the Security Council, which is the, because you're talking about permanent membership, Security Council, which is the one designated agency to make a determination on whether there exists a threat to peace and security, an authorized countermeasure, is paralyzed. Because there's 5 permanent members and they are divided. In fact, I've written a book on this, Perilous Intervention. When the Russians and the Chinese on one side and the Americans and the French and the British on the other side went on the wrong sides in Libya and Syria, and we don't go into detail, Security Council became paralyzed. Today, Security Council continues to be paralyzed. So the global institutions need to be reworked. That is the point. You're making an attempt in the World Bank. We have a good president. We are trying to find some money for developmental work. But I think you've got to go back to the Conference of Parties. because the Security Council today reflects the situation of to the victor belong the spoils after the Second World War. Today you have to rewrite those institutions. Now it's I'm glad this sentence is here. But otherwise, how do you expect India to be getting onto the Security Council when the Security Council itself is paralyzed? So you need to go to the Conference of Parties, rework. Frankly, I don't want to name. There are two countries that come to my mind who are permanent members of the Security Council. Do they deserve to be there? They're looking like third world countries. I think I've said a little more than I should have. And why was Japan not allowed? Because they were not the victors in the Second World War. All right, now Japan is also not looking so good. But India, which became independent after 1945, surely India should be there. I mean, you're the fifth largest economy. Even by that criteria, you should be there. But that's not the issue. You are the one country capable of heavy lifting. If a tsunami takes place somewhere, you need to send, R&R teams. You need to get people from under the rubble. It's India who delivers. So I think India's case is very interesting. But you can't blame the Modi government for that. The institutions have got paralyzed. But therefore, this sentence will be a rejuvenation. How will the Iran-Israel situation evolve? How will X happen? Why? That's not something I can say. But I think on foreign policy, he deserves very high marks.
And sir, before I close my interview, there are three things which I want to ask you. Prime Minister has led 10 years of transformative politics. Transformative politics both at the level of economy and both at the level of society. How will the government under Prime Minister Modi, if it gets the third term, deal with the demographic change which is happening in our country?
Your questions are very perceptive. I would not agree with the formulation if it gets a third term, because I'm a little more confident and I would use this thing when it...
You can say that, but as a journalist, I must put the word if.
Well, look, the Prime Minister is a very far-sighted and a very perceptive person. In one of the recent cabinet meetings, I'm not violating any thing, he turned around and said that we go on drawing satisfaction from the demography which is there. We are a young society. We go on saying, such a large percentage of India is below 29 years old, and an even larger percentage of India is below 35 years old. But these people will grow up sometime. I mean, a few days later, I sent him a note saying that I had prepared a note on homes for senior citizens. Senior citizens care facility. I sent it to all the chief ministers, etc. Some of us have been thinking about that, but he's been thinking more than anyone else, because he realizes. Somebody asked him, तो आप 2029 के चुनाव की तैयारी कर रहे हैं? तो he said, मैं 2029 की नहीं कर रहा, मैं तो 2047 की कर रहा हूँ. Here is a man who works to a vision, and he pursues that vision in terms of a blueprint for development. So for him to address issues of demography, which is your question, is absolutely there. I can see it all the time. He's now not only, look at the references he's made during his introduction of the Sankalp Patra. Ayushman Bharat for people above the age of 70. Correct? 2 crore se 3 crore Lakhpati Didi, demography mein, the women 50% becomes important. Look at all the other things. Actually, he is preparing the transformation for 2047 with the demographic alteration that is going to take place in our society as the centerpiece of that transformation.
A lot of governments tried creating Silicon Valleys, those areas where innovations can take place. It has not happened.
It's taking place in some form, Bangalore, Hyderabad. But this is more. Again, there is a vision at play here.
Yes.
There's a vision at play.
Yes.
What you want is, you actually want to encourage. मुझे एक बात बताइए, मैं जाता हूँ ये Davos, I go to some of these ADIPEC. मैंने तो कर दिया. Instead of ADIPEC is very good. I've produced something, I means my ministry, something called the India Energy Week. We had the first show in Bangalore, next one in Goa, and we are setting up a 240-acre campus. We have the land, ONGC has the land. We'll make it a world-class conference facility. Now tell me, isn't that what you want to do? There's a separate section on technology and innovation, but the whole manifesto, Sankalp Patra, is actually replete with references there. On this section on technology and innovation is something very interesting that I want to tell you. One, we not only celebrated the landing on the South Pole of the, but we followed it up. And let's see what it says here. It says here, we will launch Gaganyaan. Bharat's first human spaceflight mission, and land an astronaut on the moon, a sign of Bharat's progress and prosperity in Amrit Kal. There's a political party saying this, which has great pride in what it has done. Then it says, we will establish the Bharatiya Antariksha Station, BS. We will also operationalize a second launch complex. We are looking at the space economy. Like when you did the ocean blue economy, now you're looking at the space economy, positioning Bharat as a leading space power. We will set up a global space academy, and so on and so forth. But he's also talking about 5G, 6G. He's also talking about green hydrogen. So these science, technology, modernization, cutting edge in every field. You know, biofuels is a story. It's this man solely responsible. Previous government tried to bring in biofuel blending in up to 5% in 10 states and union territories. We ended up with 1.4% countrywide. We had a target of 10% blending by 2022 November. We did it 5 months in advance. We have a target of 20% blending by 2030. We were going to do it by 2025. Green hydrogen. India is at the cutting edge today. Under PLI scheme, we've provided 19,700 crores for electrolyzer manufacture. Every electrolyzer manufacturer in the world is in India. So I think the Prime Minister's worldview, his view of development of India is not only anchored in digital. He talked about digital infrastructure today.
Can I bring this question home, sir?
Yeah.
How has technology and Prime Minister's inclination to play with it also streamlined the governance? Because that's the first issue.
We are running paperless offices now. Today, if any babu or any minister sits on a file, you can actually trace where it's been lying for how long. That's one very major difference. I am not saying we've come home. Look, there is always a great reluctance to computerize, to do everything using technology. But my God, look at where we were in 2014 and where we are now. I mean, that's the best yardstick, that is the best assessment you can make on before and after. And I think it has made a difference. He himself is very technology savvy. I'm not sure all his ministers, including me, I personally sometimes think I'm technologically challenged, but even I have to keep up.
And lastly, आप वाकई मानते हैं इस बार 400 पार?
You know, what is the value of a Sankalp Patra? It is to give you confidence, to tell people you're on the right path. Today, after the Sankalp Patra, more than ever before, am I convinced about is baar 400 par.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you.